Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The Senate report has now come down on the government's changes to the Citizenship Act, and it is clear, it is absolutely clear now as to why the government should withdraw the changes that they have in front. When they first put these changes forward, when they first put these proposals forward, they asked for public submissions. They got thousands of public submissions, and then they decided to keep them secret. And we thought, oh, wonder why that would be. Public submissions ordinarily are public things, but they decided to keep them secret. So the Senate inquiry went through a new exercise in receiving public submissions. They received 14,000, more than 14,000 submissions. Guess how many were in support of the government's proposal?
How many?
Two. One of those two was from the department, and it's a bit tough for them to put in a submission that's not in favour of the legislation, and the other was from the Monarchists League, and they were the only two. And there is a reason. There is a reason why this government is in a situation now where their citizenship changes should simply be withdrawn. They have in front of us legislation which should be withdrawn because it deals with a problem that does not exist. It deals with the arguments that they have put forward for it don't stack up, and the arguments against it are overwhelming. There's two principles that the minister puts when he talks about citizenship, and when you hear each of them, in the first instance, they do sound reasonable. One is, oh well, you should have to wait 4 years before you become a citizen, and the other he says, well, you should be able to have competent English. Now they both sound like reasonable arguments, except here's the problem: you already have to be here for 4 years. You already have to have been here for 4 years. What happens at the moment is one of those years needs to be as a permanent resident, but you have to have been here for 4 years. Now, many people come to Australia initially on a temporary visa, often on consecutive temporary visas before they end up getting permanent residence. The real-life impact of this is not going from 1 year to 4 years, because everyone has to wait 4 years already. The real-life impact of this will be people waiting in Australia for more than a decade. For more than a decade before they are asked to make a pledge to this country. Now, how on earth is that good for the country? To have people living here for more than a decade and not being asked to make a pledge of commitment to Australia. It's certainly not good for them, and I don't see how it's good for the rest of the country. But the problems with the delay almost pale into insignificance compared to the problems with the English language test. Now, when the minister says, well, you should have to have competent English, most people would hear that and think, oh, that's reasonable, you should have to have competent English. The problem is, the word competent, as it's been put into this bill, has a very precise legal meaning. It refers to level 6 on the IELTS test, a test based in Cambridge University, a test that costs hundreds of dollars to sit for and thousands of dollars to get the training to be able to get up your English up to that level. The government does provide English-level training. It doesn't get people anywhere near a level 6. Nowhere near. So you can do your 500 hours that not every visa holder is entitled to, but some are. Many people will get to level 2. Some people will get to level 4. No one through that course, but as a result of that course, is trained to get to level 6. No one. There are no shortage of people who have been living in Australia their entire lives who would not pass this test at level 6. Now, when people say, oh, now the minister then says, oh, but there's two streams. There's an academic stream and there's a general stream, and they're going to use the general stream, not the academic stream. So I went off to the web page of IELTS where you can get examples of the test to test the level. Here's from the comprehension test. Now, it's not just a comprehension test. There's a reading test, a listening test, a comprehension test, a writing test. You have to be able to write an essay. All these forms of tests are part of getting to a level in IELTS. This is from the comprehension test. Calisthenics enters the historical record at about 480 BC with Herodotus' account of the Battle of Thermopylae. Herodotus reported that prior to the battle, the god King Xerxes sent a scout party to spy on his Spartan enemies. The scouts informed Xerxes that the Spartans, under the leadership of King Leonidas, were practising some kind of bizarre synchronised movements akin to a tribal dance. It turns out their tribal dance was not a superstitious ritual, but a form of calisthenics by which they were building awe-inspiring physical strength and endurance. What Well, for one, that's not the academic test. That's the easier one. That's the easier one. But where they're both marked, you end up having to get to the same level of proficiency with the English language. But what on earth does that have to do with being a good Australian? What on earth does that have to do with being a decent Australian citizen? Now, we agree that you have to have what people would regard as competent English, what people would generally regard as competent English, because there is already a test, and the test is in English. Now, guess what? If the test is in English, I reckon it's pretty hard to pass if you have no English. If you asked me to pass a test that was written in a different language, I'll admit I would struggle. I would not be able to do it. In the same way, if you don't have conversational level English, you already can't pass. But university level English, as a demand, 1, is ridiculous. 2, is an act of extraordinary snobbery that sends a message to every Australian who doesn't have that level of English that this government, if it had the choice, would prefer they weren't here. But here's the catch. Not everybody will have to reach university level English. There are lots of countries in the world that have English as an official language. India, Singapore, lots of countries have English as one of their official languages. But there are only 5 where, if you're a passport holder from those countries, you won't have to have university-level English. The UK, New Zealand, Ireland, Canada and the United States. It just so happens the 5 white English-speaking countries are the only countries where you don't need university-level English. Now, the minister will say, oh, but there are visas that pick out individual countries. There's lots of visas that are organised on a bilateral basis. The backpacker visa, for example, there's a series of visas where we negotiate for a visa, but we have never as a country said you deal with citizenship in that way. And I say, if you come from any non-white English-speaking country, you'll have to have university level of English, but if you come from a white English-speaking country, it's all okay, is something that I've got to say. I don't know how many people other than the minister knew about it, but none of them spoke out. On issues like 18C, from time to time, some of those members opposite have spoken out. But when you think of something as prejudiced as the measures within this, why have we heard nothing from the member for Reid? Why have we heard nothing from the member for Banks, the member for Bennelong, the member for Chisholm, the member for Deakin? Why is it that they are so comfortable with the thought of having people in their electorates know that if they had their way, they'd just rather they'd never become citizens? All the bravery that used to be there on those backbenches has all disappeared on this, all disappeared completely. But the minister will argue, oh, but it's all because of national security. Well, I asked this when I had my briefing from the department, and normally I keep briefings from departments as a matter of confidentiality, but the minister decided to tell the media about my briefing, so I think I'm pretty much off the hook. And I asked them, did this come as a recommendation from ASIO? No. Did this come as a recommendation from the AFP? No. Did this come as a recommendation from any national security agency? No. None of them. Where did this come from? Oh, it's a recommendation from a report written by 2 people. 2 people, both happen to be members of the Liberal Party. Senator Connie Fierravanti-Wells and Philip Ruddock. And this entire proposal is based on consultation only with them, and when they go out to the rest of the community they discover it's 14,000 to 2. 14,000 to 2. What's in front of us here is a proposal that changes who we are as a country. There are lots of countries in the world that have people who are here as permanent residents who become a permanent underclass of non-citizens. Australia has not been that sort of country ever since we got rid of the White Australia policy. We should not go back. We should not go back to becoming a country with a permanent underclass of non-citizens, with a permanent underclass of people who live here their whole lives but are told they never belong. There's a line that used to be in the welcome note that is read out at every citizenship ceremony when people become Australian citizens. It used to finish with the words, "Welcome home." The moment they got into office, they took those words back. Let me tell you, and let me make it clear, citizenship is meant to be the way we build ourselves as a society, not the way we divide. Yeah.